Welcome back to the episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON20 to get 20% off your next order. It is Monday, March the 15th in the year 2021. And in a jam-packed weekend, the Big Ten Conference Tournament that it was, we learned a lot, about the Buckeyes. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at JStevens07. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter as well at Locked On Buckeye. Lineup for today in segment 2. We're going to talk about some pluses and minuses, some things we can take away from the Big Ten Conference Tournament. Segment 3, I'm going to defend two people that have been criticized quite a bit over the past few days. We begin today's show with a quick recap and summary of what we just witnessed in the Big Ten Conference Tournament. Think about the end of the regular season. I go back to this point in the season on purpose. 4 straight losses. The chance and potential to be a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament was basically thrown away because 1 loss, and then 2 loss, then 3 loss. Then ultimately that last game of the regular season, a loss to the Illinois Fighting Illini. And many people were wondering, they were questioning, they were thinking, what's going on in the heads of the Buckeyes? Will they ever get back on track? I don't think anybody ever doubted how good this team is. I think people were wondering, is it too little, too late, and will they fall in the first game of the conference tournament and lose all momentum and confidence going into the NCAA tournament? Well, we saw a win over Minnesota. We saw a win over the team up north. We saw a win over Purdue, not in that order. And then we also saw a really hard-fought game, which came down to the final seconds, went into overtime, where Ohio State kept pushing Illinois to the final seconds. We saw an Ohio State team that fought. We saw an Ohio State team that did not back down. Yes, there were times that at the end of the game, they did have issues. We'll talk about those here in a second. But they didn't stop playing. They didn't stop fighting at all. You can say, Jay, well, the Minnesota game, that was a game there where they had a chance to close it out to win it, and then they did not. They kind of threw the ball away to the other team. They basically said, hey, Minnesota, you want to win the game? Here, it's right here for you. Kind of playing hot potato. Take it. Talked about it last week. Going to talk about it again. That's kind of like what it was. But to follow that game up, with the win over Purdue, a team that you had not beaten all season long, a team in Purdue that has a player in Travion Williams that gives you fits. And Ohio State found a way to win that game. Ohio State also found a way to beat the team up north. And I had heard, I'll tackle this right now. I was going to wait. Actually, I wasn't going to talk about this part, but I will say this very nugget. There have been people out there complaining from the Wolverines fan base that have said, the refs were in your favor. The refs were there. Go back and watch the game. Go back and watch the replay. I know Buckeye fans, you don't like how many of you complain about the refs every single game. One of my buddies, Mike Martin, he hits me up all the time. The ref did this, the ref did that. But in that game, I will not say it was the refs. It was a team that fought, that kept fighting, that won the game. A 1-point win? Yes. It could have gone either way. Ultimately, the Buckeyes did come out victorious on the right side of the game, of the outcome of that matchup. It was a fun weekend. It was an exciting weekend. A lot of basketball was played, not just basketball that was played in the Big Ten, but you had the Big 12. You had the ACC. You had Georgetown, who in a way only won 9 games in the regular season, kept fighting, and Patrick Ewing in Madison Square Garden came out and kept fighting and beat Creighton, a team that was in the regular season better than them, but on that day, Creighton was no match for the Georgetown Hoyas. And we're going to find that same thing going into the NCAA tournament. There are going to be matchups that some teams, hopefully not Oral Roberts on Friday, but there will be teams that they're no match to that team. And the better team just doesn't play better. They're not better. And Ohio State needed this because going into the NCAA tournament, just play a hypothetical with me as you close out this first segment. Let's just say Ohio State, They lose the last 4 games of the regular season, and then ultimately, when you go to the first game of the Big Ten tournament, which ultimately ended up being Minnesota, Buckeyes lose. That's a tough pill to swallow, baby. That's rough. So you mean to tell me you're going to lose 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row, then ultimately you had a 5-game losing streak, 5-star reviews, fill the review section on Apple with 5-star reviews. You get into a 5-game losing streak going into the very biggest games of your career to date, the very biggest games of the season to date. You're going in there with a 5-game losing streak. Mentally, that messes with your mentals. Mentally, that messes with you a lot. Physically, your body may be rested because you had a game on a Saturday, you want to play a game on a Thursday, you would have lost the game on a Thursday, you would have basically a little over a week in between games, 7-8 days in between games. That's a lot of time for your body to rest with an Ohio State team that needs all the rest it can get and get more practice time because you just don't know what's going to happen next. But Ohio State showed in the NCAA tournament they can use some of the success in the Big Ten tournament to their favor. Say, hey, we know how good we are. We know how good we can be. We see Junior coming up and making big shot after big shot after big shot. Even people on Twitter tweeting at me, people I went to school with, I like that guy. I have been very, very critical of Dwayne Washington Jr., but one thing I cannot criticize is his play. He makes some boneheaded plays, but everybody makes boneheaded plays every now and then. Junior stepped up, made big shots. A lot of people stepped up, and we can say, looking back at the Big Ten Conference Tournament, this was a great little teaser or momentum-building sequence of games that the Buckeyes can look back on and say, look, we know how he played at the end of the regular season. We put a good string of games together. 1 win, 2 win, 3 win. Barely came up close against Illinois to say, hey, look, we can compete with the big dogs in college basketball. We can beat people consistently back to back to back as well. We're going to step away very quickly. When we come back, we're going to talk about some pluses and minuses from the Big Ten Conference Tournament, things that we could take away from the conference tournament as a whole. But first, check this out. This episode is sponsored by Blue Chew. Blue Chew is making waves and bringing more confidence to the bedroom. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Blue Chew's tablets combat all forms of ED and can help men gain extra confidence for when it's time to perform. Blue Chew is an online prescription service, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. It ships right to your door in a discreet package. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online. So if you could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. Just pay $5 for shipping. That's BlueChew.com. Promo code LOCKEDON. That is LOCKEDON to receive your first month free. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Football might be over, but NBA, college basketball, and the NHL are in full swing. BetOnline even covers awards, TV shows, and reality TV. Real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine. BetOnline has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's even free to sign up. Head to betonline.ag on your computer or your mobile device and make sure you use promo code LOCKEDON to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you sign up. Once again, head to betonline.ag on your computer or your mobile device and make sure when you sign up, you use promo code LOCKEDON. That is LOCKEDON to receive your 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, your online sports book experts. March Madness is here, and that means bracket challenges. Join our Locked On Listener Bracket Challenge on ESPN. Submit your March Madness picks, beat your favorite host, and if you win, you will get a guest appearance on Locked On Today, our daily news podcast. The link to join is in the show notes of this podcast. Get your picks in today. If this is your first time checking out, listening, or watching Locked On Buckeyes, I want to say welcome. Or if it's your first time in a long time watching or listening to a podcast, I want to say welcome back. I thoroughly appreciate everyone that takes time out of their day to listen or watch the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Buckeyes so you don't miss a beat. Locked On Buckeyes drops a fresh new episode for you every Monday through Friday. Anytime there's a tournament, and there are games played after that, yes, in your head as a fan, you say there's a time to live, to play another day. Survive and advance was the motto and the approach that I had in my head going into the tournament. And then actually after every game, you survive. If you survive, you do advance. And with games coming up this week on the first four, which is Thursday, Ohio State plays on Friday, it makes a lot of people think, question, and wonder, what are some things we can take away from this weekend's game? Now, coming up this week, we'll look more into Oral Roberts, the next opponent that Ohio State has in their first-round game of the NCAA Tournament. We'll look more into that. We'll do some recapping tomorrow on the podcast. So we got a lot of good things coming up here on the podcast this week to lead up into the first game of the NCAA Tournament for Ohio State. But as we look back on this Monday, what did Ohio State do well? What can they improve on? Are there personnel things that maybe the five that were on the court weren't the best? And we can just take some time together to just kind of recap what we just watched. The Minnesota win, the Purdue win, which I think that holds a lot of weight with this team mentally, because I don't know how confident they would have been going after that game if they would have lost that. That's a game that when I look at that game against Purdue, we think about Travion Williams. I know Zach Edey played okay. I'm not a big Zach Edey fan, but okay, that's another story for another day. Zach Edey, you got Jaden Ivey. You have all of these guys, Eric Hunter Jr., you have all of these guys there at Purdue that gave Ohio State fits during both games in the regular season, and Ohio State found a way to win. That's one big thing. You found a way to beat a team, get over not just a win, not just winning the game, but you got to find a way to get over a mental hurdle in that matchup. But then you follow it up with a game over the team up north, which you showed you could beat one ranked team. The very next day, you can beat another ranked team. I have talked all year long about how this Big Ten Conference season league play, some people call it, maybe an old school term. I do pick up on some old school things every now and then. Yeah, it was a gauntlet. It was tough. It was hard to play at times. Imagine being E.J. Liddell, Kyle Young. I almost say Kyle Little. Not they don't have the same last name, Jay. E.J. Little, Kyle Young, and Zed Key. Imagine being those guys, and you're. I hope you can hear that because it's just the pounding, not punches in the head like they're a boxer, but literal. The pounding that they take every day every game down low in the paint. Ohio State can take away one thing. They can compete. They know not just physically, you can compete, but mentally, they got over that hump and said, yeah, we are still one of the best teams in the country. Yes, I know I said it here before. Losing streak at the end of the season is tough. It is hard, but you can get that. Imagine. No conference tournament, the old school way, old school days. Even though I think it was no one until the late 90s when the Big Ten actually had a conference tournament. They're one of the last teams to the party, very similar to the way that it was right before the BCS was implemented in college football, how the Big Ten and then the Pac-10 were not included into the bowl games that were pseudo or quote-unquote national championship games or the conferences that could play in the national championship game. Very interesting how that is for the Big Ten and Pac-10 are always late to this past football season. I don't even think about the past football season, but you're late to the party, you see what happens because of it. But Ohio State, I lost my train of thought. Give me a second. The conference tournament. Yes, the old school days. It took me a couple of seconds, guys. Old school days. There was no conference tournament. They would have no way to rebuild confidence after the 4-game losing streak. You go into that NCAA tournament, you're like, ooh, we hope. Do we still have it? These are questions going through your mind, but you do still have it. Now, the minus is always going to be closing the games. Closing games out has been, will be, and probably will continue to be a problem for Ohio State. Now, early in the season, league play in middle of the season, Ohio State did find ways to close out games. There was no fight. There was they didn't stop fighting. They didn't quit. There was nothing. None of those where you're going to timeout, coach. What do you mean timeout? It's 2 seconds left in the game. What are you talking about timeout, coach? I can't go anymore. I'm tired. You're tired? You're tired? Yeah, coach. I'm tired, man. Mentally I can't. Physically I know I can, but mentally I can't do it, coach. I can't do it. And these are the things that are there. Having that there, the conference tournament, that's a major thing. But the Buckeyes got to find a way to close out games. I was trying not to be ultra critical or ultra combative with some people that may not like what I'm saying. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not trying to be ultra combative or critical or any of those words. But Ohio State, and I'll talk about E.J. Liddell here in a second, the very next segment. Tidbit. He's one of the guys I'm going to defend. But Ohio State down the stretch, I don't know if it's not knowing who should have the ball. Maybe Dwayne Washington Jr. has a stretch where he's not playing well, made some boneheaded plays, but he still thinks he needs to have the ball instead of passing it around to the hot man or just letting C.J. Walker do things. I don't know. I am not sure. But they got to figure out a way to do it. And you having a few days to practice. Another positive, you're staying in Indianapolis. You're staying right there where you've played the past few games, where you've been lately. So you're already not having to go from traveling from Columbus or wherever your conference tournament was played and then having to go to Indianapolis, then having to get there, check into the hotel, get your room assignments, get used to and try to figure out where the COVID testing was going to be at that time. You're already there. So you're already having these things you're getting accustomed to. The one big takeaway plus, you guys got the mental confidence back, even being able to compete with Illinois in the way you did after starting 0-for-9 to start the game, but also find a way to finish the game. You know what's going to help you finish a game? Get the ball in the right person's hands at the end of the game so they can make the right play so you can win the game. Sounds like a crazy little idea or thought. But it's just basketball. It's simply just basketball. Let's step away one more time. When we come back, I'll defend two people. I already gave you a hint about who one was. Who will the second one be? Stick around to find out. But first, check this out. There's a good chance you're possibly somebody like me that loves a good. When I say good, I mean a really good protein bar. And I'm already a picky eater, so it's very hard for me to fall in love with something. You know, the one that fits the macros for your diet, and it even tastes like candy as well. Well, guys, I have ended my search, and I thoroughly encourage you to consider ending yours as well. Built Bar is great for the health-conscious guy. It'll help you lose or maintain weight while indulging in a delicious treat. Bars are low calorie, low sugar. I like that. High protein, high fiber, and it's even great for the keto diet. And with the purchase at BuiltBar.com, you will get a free cooler. Now, those are only available while supplies last. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON20, and you will get 20% off your next order. Once again, that is go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON20. That is LOCKEDON, the number 2 and the number 0 to get 20% off at BuiltBar.com. NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson host Locked On's Peacock and Williamson every Monday through Friday. Brian and Matt give you the national perspective all around the NFL, covering all the latest news and insight on every game, team, and move around the NFL. Get your picks, previews, and much more every weekday with the Peacock and Williamson podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We wrap up this Monday edition here on Locked On Buckeyes. I want to remind you about one thing. Mondays on Locked On Big Ten, yours truly, myself, and Big Ten Ben Stevens will be doing a recap show where we recap the weekend that was in Big Ten country. We have a lot, and I truly mean a lot to talk about. So when you're done listening to this, go ahead on to Locked On Big Ten and check that out as well. I do believe we had a little technical difficulty, but I believe we are back on track. In the last segment, I did mention one player I was going to defend, a little person, I was going to defend, and he deserves it. On the Twitter, I normally don't. I tweet some during games. I tweeted more as the games have been bigger during the season, as far as like back and forth on personal thoughts of the games. Fandoms comes out quite a bit as well. But one thing I noticed that I saw, people were complaining about E.J. Liddell. E.J. Liddell. Go back to the game against the team up north. He's in the backcourt, waves everybody off. It's him one-on-one against Hunter Dickinson. And what do we see? Hunter Dickinson strips E.J. Liddell. Boneheaded play. I believe it was 2 points for the team up north. It wasn't enough for them to win the game, but I do believe 2 points for Dickinson. What do we see at the end of this game? He gets Kofi Cockburn. Pump fake. And I forget if it was a pick and roll situation or not, but he pump fakes, drives right to go around him. And ultimately, there was a defender right here to his right, Cockburn to his left. He did get around him if it was a one-on-one situation, and there was no help defender right there, right in front of him. Not someone coming over, but just like a help defender right there. There's a good chance that E.J. Liddell gets 2 points, and many people, maybe you, I don't know if it's you or not. I'm not going back and checking receipts. I just saw Corey Thompson, host of the Scarred and Great podcast, the co-host of the podcast. He was one saying, no, I'm not accepting the E.J. Liddell slander because X, Y, and Z, and he explained his thought process. And I'm right there with Corey. Corey and I agree on a lot, and I will say, no. You're mad about two things that happen. It's basketball. Unfortunately, things don't always go your way. It's just a fact of life. It's a matter of life. We can't sit out here and say, oh, man, no, you messed up. It's horrible. Get off my team. Let's have a reality check. Let's just do that. If E.J. Liddell was not on this team, do you think this is a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament? I say no. You probably would say no as well. Oh, another one. If E.J. Liddell is not on this basketball team, do you think that Ohio State is in the Big Ten Conference Tournament Championship game? I say no, and you probably will say no as well. One more. I'm not done with this. You guys can tell there are things that don't make any sense. Last one. If E.J. Liddell was not on this team, do you think this team would be in the NCAA tournament? Probably not. You see how the Big Ten, how league play was this year? You see how good E.J. Liddell is, an all-league performer? If Dwayne Washington Jr. is the best player on this team, and I like Dwayne. I've been critical on purpose because I believe he could be a really good, he could be a better basketball player than he already is. But if he's the best guy on your team, I don't think this team is as good as it is this year. So let's just kind of pump the brakes on the E.J. Liddell slander. Pump the brakes. There are mistakes. He's a sophomore. He will learn from it and live to play again. And I hope he's a 4-year player. I know next year he'll be better and he'll probably go to the league. But just as my hopes, I like when players stick it out at their school, especially when they're as good as him. If he's a 4-year player, oh my goodness, next year is going to be good. But think about it. E.J. Liddell, a senior. Zed Key, a junior. Michi Johnson, a sophomore. This year does not count. And so many others. You have some youngsters that are, I think a young man, Caden, who's going to be a freshman next year on next year's team. This team is going to be good. Can really be good. Chris Holtmann, however, at the same time, many of you have criticized E.J. Liddell. I'm not one here for the Chris Holtmann slander, for talking bad about Chris Holtmann or any of that. You say, why? Think about what Ohio State would be if the roles were switched. I talked about this once on Chris Holtmann Appreciation Day. We'll do it again. Think about if Chris Holtmann went to Indiana University. He was already coaching in the state of Indiana. He is from the state of Indiana. And think about if Archie Miller went to Ohio State. Do you see how the Indiana Hoosiers have played the basketball? Do you see how they don't develop players? Do you? You probably don't. All you know is that when we see Indiana, we can just check that off and say it's a win. There's a reason why Chris Holtmann is so hard on refs, because he deserves a lot more respect as being one of the best coaches in the Big Ten. Yes, there are some really good coaches, and Brad Underwood is going to get his respect as well. but Chris Holtmann deserves his. One little thing I'll leave you with, and then we'll close this show out. This is the 8th consecutive year that Chris Holtmann, when he has been the head coach of a basketball team in college basketball, that Chris Holtmann has won 20 games. His first year at Gardner-Webb, he went 21-13. The 2013-14 season, he was, I believe, an assistant coach at Butler University. Ultimately, Brandon Miller, the guy that took over after Brad Stevens, left for medical leave. Chris Holtmann took over. And then at Butler, Chris Holtmann went 23-11, 22-11, 25-9. At Ohio State in his first 3 years, 25-9, 20-15, 21-10, and this year 21-8. And it sure looks like there's a good possibility he will win some more games here as well. It would be a 7th straight trip to the NCAA tournament if it wasn't for last year in the Rona ruining everyone's NCAA and March Madness plans. That's just one little tidbit. Think about how many coaches. Think about how many coaches out there could say in the first 8 years. First 8 years of being a head coach at any level, you have won, let's say, college basketball, 20 games. Think about how many coaches in the NBA have won 50 games in their first 8 years of coaching. And in the playoffs, of course, you win 50 games, you go to the playoffs. Think about how many college basketball coaches have won 20 games in their first 8 years and would have had a 7-year straight streak of making the NCAA tournament from the first time they made the NCAA tournament. It wasn't for an abbreviation or something cutting it off at the end of the season. A lot of people get on Chris Holtmann. To me, it makes no sense. Chris Holtmann is a good basketball coach, one of the better basketball coaches out there that doesn't get the recognition that he deserves. Chris Holtmann, and I'm not here for that. EJ Liddell, I'm not here for that criticism either. Guys, thank you so much for listening and enjoying another episode of Locked On Buckeyes. Guys, as always, you can follow me on Twitter at JSteven07. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter as well at Locked On Buckeyes. Remember, guys, 5-star reviews, fill the review section on Apple with 5-star reviews. Other places you can listen to and enjoy Locked On Buckeyes are the radio.com app, which is free, or Google Podcast, Stitcher, and even iHeartRadio. Just to name a few places you can subscribe or follow Locked On Buckeyes so you don't miss a beat. Football Wednesday will be back on this Wednesday, but tomorrow, keeping our minds focused on the NCAA tournament.